We move into these three modes of livelihood: horticulture, pastoralism, and agriculture. All of these represent modes of livelihood following the domestication revolution. Horticulture is a mode of livelihood. The next mode of livelihood we talk about is pastoralism. Pastoralism is based on the domestication of animals. It has a more clearly defined division of labor based on gender roles. Again, primarily use rights, but it moves us even further toward exclusion, toward exclusive rights of private property. Because in pastoralist societies, animals and other forms of personal property are owned privately, and they're owned exclusively by families and individuals. In fact, if we were looking at a society like for example, the Nuer, who we're going to talk about again when we get into kinship, the most important source of wealth in that society is cattle, and the cattle are held privately by families. That is the family's wealth. In pastoral societies, there's a much clearer gender division of labor. In pastoralist groups, men herd animals and women process the products of the herd. And as we said, we get important forms of exclusive property like animals, housing, and personal items, although things like migratory rights or pasture land continue to be based primarily on use rights. So there's an increased emphasis on exclusionary property rights and the decline of use rights, although use rights persist. So pastoralism, again, brings us, if we go back to that chart, brings us a little bit more from the left to the right toward an exclusive idea of private property. Pastoralism is highly sustainable ecologically, but most of the time pastoralist systems are existing alongside other systems, and so they are very often squeezed for space. And when they get squeezed for space, this raises the possibility of all different kinds of ecological problems, including those connected with overgrazing. Agriculture is a mode of livelihood based on the growing of domestic crops on permanent plots of land using plowing, irrigation, fertilizer, and so on. Agriculture is a very intensive strategy and moves us finally into a surplus producing society. It is the game changer that brings us into a full-blown surplus producing and surplus storing society. One kind of agriculture is based on family farming, or in other words, it's called peasant agriculture, where production is geared to support families and to produce goods for trade or for sale. Agricultural societies, not like the other ones we talked about, are surplus producing economies. Because surpluses are more readily available, then we also see with agricultural societies the rise of markets and the rise of long distance trading, as well as the coming of urbanization. Agriculture is the thing that makes permanent settlement possible. The division of labor is very strongly defined according to gender, where the family or the household is the basic unit of production. Within agricultural systems, men farm while women do domestic labor, which includes the processing of goods, or where markets are established, men farm and women market. In such societies, the control by women over market activities results in a higher degree of status equality. So you see there again, you have this idea of control of resources being related to status. Here, if women are in systems where they have control over market activities, they tend to have higher status in societies. Compare that to the case of female farming systems. Female farming systems are those in which women and girls play a major role in livelihood. In these systems, which we find in places like India and Southeast Asia, places where wet rice agriculture is practiced, in these systems, men are responsible for plowing the fields, and women's labor is the backbone of that type of farming. In that kind of agriculture, women then occupy prominent positions not only as laborers, but as owners and managers, since they are in control of agricultural production. Agriculture is a system where property relations now are based entirely on exclusionary rights.